All right, so again, good afternoon to everybody. Just to recap where we ended during the session one. So we just created a sample database from scratch, and we quickly showed you how the costing is actually being handled by the system. So the next quick things I want to just briefly touch upon are the option setting in MF. So a while ago, when we were doing all of the transactions, if you noticed, I kept putting in production area, location, and that is mainly because we did not yet set up a default production area and a default location. So this is part of the MF option setup. And right now, you can see we are defining a default area and location, as well as a default MO status. So as we said earlier, the status of new means it's only visible to the planners. Approved means it can be seen by everybody but not yet active. And then released means it's now ready to go and be processed. So depending on the client's needs, you can set it up to be by default released or approved or new. But for today, you'll just set it to be released. And then this is just a default transfer from to, but we can just maintain that and go. Another quick thing that I wanted to highlight in this options table is the tolerance for issuance and receipt. Uh, Earlier today, it was set to none. That simply means that the user can issue more than the quantity required with no limitations. And the MO receipt tolerance was also set to none. That only means that the client can or the user can receive as many of the item being produced as he wants. But typically, you have the option here to set it to either a warning or an error message with a tolerance as well. So if you put 10% tolerance, that means that the system will allow you to receive or issue more than 10% of what was required. And then beyond that, it will trigger either a warning or an error message. So warning means you're just being notified, but the user can bypass that. But if you set it to error, then this will be strictly an error message, preventing the user from proceeding. So those are just some of the settings in the MF options. We'll come back to this later for the others. But at this point, after we save that options, I just need, okay, it was saved. I can then go back and then create another MO, and then we can show the effect. But before that, I also want to assign the visual process flow charts. So this is something that we provide in our repository. So if you want to use the custom process flows for transactions and maintaining the BOM, you can do so. As just assign the user, and then now we have here the process flow chart that we were showing earlier. So just to create an MO, so now this is FG001. Let's order 10. And you can see now that the production area is pre-populated. The MO status has been released. We can just add this, MO3. And then just to make it fast, because I just want to show you the effects of the processing, I'll just use backflushing. Again, you have here the default production area location already. You can change it if you want, though. I can receive all, but you can see here, if the order quantity is 10, I can actually put in 11, so the system doesn't think it's wrong. But the moment you try to go 12, this is where the tolerance kicks in, and now it's a warning. Do we want to proceed or not? Assuming we allow it, I can then trigger a recalculation, and the issuance of the raw material has now been calculated to match the quantity being received. And this is again triggering the warnings for the overissuance of raw material. But what if I actually change this back to the normal quantities and post? So this is now a scenario where I have received more than expected, but consumed as expected. So if we go back to the MO and refresh for MO number 3, we can see that we have 12 produced. MO has been closed because again, we have exceeded the tolerance set up in our MF options. It's above 100%, so it will always close. And then material-wise, we actually consume just what we expected. So the total cost is 40, and then this is now 40 actual cost, but our quantity produced is 12. So in this scenario, output was actually greater than the expected order quantity. If we go back to inventory control transaction history for FG001, you would now see that it also triggered 2 entries. The receipt of 12, sorry, we received 12. This is at standard cost, which was the projected cost column in the MO, 48. But because we actually only consumed $40, so the MO closeout actually had to deduct $8 from the cost of production. So again, this is just to emphasize that input must equal to output. Since my input is $40, the assumed or estimated cost needs to be adjusted back to reflect the input costs. So that's a play around the costing. And then now let's go and make our BOM a little bit more interesting. So when I set up my BOM a while ago, I did not put any resources. So now let's do so. To do that, we have to go back to the setup, resource, and then now maybe I want to have a direct labor cost. So this is just to put in labor, resource. And then notice now that for the cost type, I have a choice to say whether this is a setup labor type, run labor type, or overhead type. So this is actually just a cost bucket within the item standard cost maintenance. Where do you want it to reflect? So in this case, I want it to be run labor. And then now we have an option here. What is the cost basis? Do we want it to be based on the runtime? Or do we want it to be based on just the quantity? So if we want to use runtime, then we need to define a runtime in the MF operation later. Do we want it by minute or hour? So let's just set it to minute, and then maybe we say it's $1 per minute. So this is now an example of a resource for labor that we can add to the operation later on. Now, I just want to highlight for overhead, it's the same, of course. I won't go into it anymore, but notice that if I select overhead, the cost basis can still be runtime or overhead quantity. So we know a lot of clients would actually use quantity here. So that means for every piece of the product, maybe they want to add a certain amount for overhead cost. So this is quite common, particularly in Asia and Africa. But we know that a lot of clients in North America, they actually prefer to calculate their overhead as a factor of runtime. So that means it will still be hour or minute, and it will be a factor to be added as overhead cost, but based on the runtime. So this is a quite normal setup as well for several clients. All right. So with that, I can go back to my BOM. Before I go to the BOM, sorry. I have to link the resource to my work center. So I have to go to Work Center Master, Assembly, Resource, put in. Now I want to have a run labor cost. If it's run labor, typically it's variable. So the more you produce, the more it costs. And notice that I have here a factor of 1. So it's 1, 1, save. So just to quickly explain, for fixed basis, typically this is applied for setup labor. So for setup labor, it doesn't really matter how big the batch run is. The cost of setting up would be the same, whether it's for one piece of the product or 10 million piece of that item. So that's why we have a fixed basis type. For the quantity, it's just a factor. So a lot of clients will use this in cases where maybe in some operations, there's actually 2 or 3 people working at the same time to do that particular operation. So then you can use a factor of 2 or 3 to simplify the setup where the unit cost is the same, but now I need to multiply it by 3 people. So that's how you can use that. So once we have that set up, I can now go back to the BOM and manually add the resource to that BOM record. So if we go to FG001, I can go to this record. The system now can see that this Work Center 1 has a resource that I can apply to this BOM. But if I don't want to do it manually, I can actually trigger it from the Work Center as well. So if we're going back to Work Center 1, notice that I have here an option to update routing or update cost only. So in this case, because we added a resource, I need to do update routing. And this is now updating all BOMs that use this work center and copy everything, the resource, the tools, and even the setup here, if there is anything you want to be copied to the BOM. So if you set up a runtime here, it would be copied to any existing BOM. If the intent is only to change the standard cost of that resource, then we should be using the update cost only. After we have done that, if we go to the BOM, we now should see that there is a resource already added to our operation. So this is now direct labor cost. You can see it here, but of course the cost is still wrong because we haven't rolled up the BOM cost yet. And more importantly, the runtime here is blank. So since we say that our labor cost is based on runtime, we need to define a runtime for the system to be able to add in a cost. So let's just say it's just 1 minute. So it takes 1 minute to produce 1 unit of this product. And let's just say we save it here. You can now see that if I go back to the general tab, the system knows there is a labor cost of $1 that is coming from the resource. If I want to just update my standard cost based on this calculated cost, I can click on the post cost button. That would update that already. But if I want to do it for several BOMs at the same time, again, that would be where the BOM cost rollup will do the trick. So at this point, if we go to the item standard cost maintenance for FG001, now you can see there's a $1 labor cost as well. And now with that entry, let's go back to an MO, create another record here, FG001 for 10 pieces. If you look at the total cost, you can see that the system is now projecting material cost and labor cost. for MO number 4. And if we now do a backflush again, so you can, this is just creating several different examples of MO processing to show you the functionality. So now it's MO4. This time, so that it's not closed, let me do a partial run. So imagine now using backflush, but maybe around lunchtime, out of the 10 ordered, I have produced 5. I would trigger a refresh that would explode my bomb. This is now automatically assuming that we consume 5 and 10. I can post, and this is now an issuance and a receipt, but partial. If we go back to the MO and refresh, you would now see that there is a partial cost as well. We have 50% completion. And if we go back to inventory control, transaction history, just to show you the effect for FG001, you can see that receipt 4 has been posted, not yet closed. If we made it bigger, you would see that the entry actually is receipt 5, increase of 5 quantity, but there's a input here. If you drill down, just to open the whole IC adjustment screen here, you can see that there's a both increase for 5 quantity, cost of 20, that's material, and there is a $5 for labor per day. So this is the exact ledger entry. It would be debit finished good, credit WIP, which is $20, credit labor burden, which is $5. Currently, it's $25. Now, that is to show you the effect of having a resource. Let's take one step back. So a while ago, we were talking about the MF account set. We were talking about the WIP category. So maybe that part is not very clear to some of you yet. Just to quickly explain, when we were doing the MO issuances a while ago, if I go now to transaction history inquiry, let's focus on RM001. Notice that for every issuance, 1, 2, 3, 4, we are actually using IC shipment as the transaction type. And if we go into that, we can see that this is issuance 4, type shipment, quantity how much, and more importantly, notice the category code that we are using. So this is now the special WIP category that we have defined and linked to the MF account set. And this is how we are generating the debit WIP, credit raw material inventory ledger entry when we do an MO issuance. So we made use of the standard design of IC shipment to do it. So for the younger consultants in the room, maybe what you're thinking of right now is why did we use IC shipment instead of let's say IC adjustment or maybe IC internal usage. For IC adjustment, we don't want to use it because we don't want to do the cost calculation. By using IC shipment, we let Sage do the cost calculation. So now we have the freedom to use average cost, standard cost, FIFO cost, lot cost, zero cost, whatever is the costing in Sage. So that's the number one reason there. So now, why not IC internal usage? The quick answer there is because when we developed MF, there was no internal usage yet. So back then, there was only IC shipment, and we just did not want to change it anymore. So that's why we are using IC shipment. So maybe For some people, they are wondering, why did we use IC adjustment when we were doing the receipt and the closeout of the MO? And the quick answer there is because we need a way to record the receipt of the product as well as generate the correct ledger entries for manufacturing. So that is why we cannot just use IC receipt to record the finished good item coming in. We need to have debit, credit with labor overhead. And then for MO closeout, the same reason. For MO closeout, we need to adjust the cost only. And of course, the best way to do that is IC adjustment. So the bottom line for Sage 300 manufacturing, we only use two IC transactions: IC shipment, IC adjustment. That's all. So as long as you are familiar with those two transaction types in Sage, you know exactly how manufacturing is behaving, whether it's an MO issuance, an MO return, or an MO receipt. Okay? So that's just a quick explanation as to why manufacturing is doing this in this manner. So if that is clear, then let's use now our sample database here to play with the other options. So very quickly, let's now go to MF setup options. So let me jump the MO series first. So the MO series, let me talk about the third one here first. So the allow 6 decimal standard cost unit place. So this is for the costing of the item. So right now, if we don't activate this, under the bill of material, item standard cost maintenance, you would see that we are just showing the same decimal places as the currency code of Sage. So in Sage, it can be 2 or 3 decimal places, but that may be not enough for some clients. So just know that I have to close some of the screens so that we don't get into trouble. So let me just close all of this first, and then proceed back to MF setup options. So I can activate 6 decimal places if we want to. This is to allow receipt without issuance. Do we want to control that there must be a issuance of component first before there's any receipt? So this is depicted. Most clients don't activate this. Let me skip this one first. So use alphanumeric BOM version. So by default, as you were looking at the BOM a while ago, we were using version 1.00 as the masking for the version number. If you want to use A, B, C, A1, A2, you can actually turn this on, and then you would now have an option to have alphanumeric BOM version number. So that's just an option for us. This is an option that we have added later on in version 7.1, starting in version 7.1. So this last three here allows us to limit the behavior of the system. So do we want, for example, to be able to create an MO even if there is not enough stock of raw materials? So for some clients, they are just creating an MO for the future processing. It doesn't matter if I don't have stock of that component or not. For some clients, they want to make sure that they have enough stock to produce before they create an MO. So that's a setting they can play with. This option here allows us to limit the quantity being produced based on only what has been issued. So this is a much stricter control than the prior allow receipt without issuance. In this particular setting, the quantity being received must not be greater than the least issued component. So of the 10, 20 components in that BOM, the least issued raw material is limiting how much we can receive. So we can just turn that on for now, and this one as well, just to show it to you. And This option here, you can see is related to that, is whether we only allow full issuance or full receipt. So if the client does not want to have partial issuances, partial receipts, we can actually activate that option. But for our training purpose today, I'll just activate this too and show you the effect. So now with that option activated, if I go to MO entry for FG001, if I try to create something very big, well, I have to refresh it actually. All right, so now let's create an MO entry just to make sure. And then for FG001, let's say 10,000 pieces. When we try to add, notice now that the system is popping up an error that we don't have enough raw material 1 and 2 for this transaction. So that was the option a while ago that limits MO order quantity. So let's just limit it to 10 now. So now I have enough stock to produce. I can proceed for MO5. And then now let's play around with the issue quantity. So let's use MO issuance. And then this is now MO number 5. We know that we need 10 and 20. So let's just say that I issued 10. That's fully issuing raw material 1. But now I would only want to issue half of raw material 2. So this is now a partial issuance. And if we go back to the MO, refresh, we would see that material-wise, we have only issued 50% of raw material 2. And if we now try to receive, the system would now limit. Based on our current setting, we cannot receive more than how many. So let's try it. So if I try to input receipt quantity 8, you can see that the system is preventing us from proceeding, and it's calculating that the maximum receipt quantity cannot be greater than 5. That is because of raw material 2. So that is the feature that we have activated at this point. So if you want to activate this kind of validation, just know that it's there. But of course, one of the limitation here is if you did not issue one component. So for some clients, the BOM might have some allowable variance. So maybe they don't need every component to be issued. If you have a quantity with 0 in raw material issuance, that would prevent you from receiving any item as well. So just be aware of that. So that was MO receipt. Let's go back now to the MF options. So let's leave it activated for that particular case. And then this is now the MO series functionality. So if we want to activate MO series, we can. But just note, once we activate it, we cannot turn it off. The same with the 6 decimal places. This is because I might already have records with 6 decimal values and MO series values, so we cannot turn it back on off. The same for alphanumeric BOM. Once we activate that, we cannot deactivate just because of the values that might already exist. So at this point, if we activate MO series, let me show you the effect. If I go back to the manufacturing order entry, let's just close this and refresh. We would now have a series number. So instead of just creating MO1, MO2, MO3, we now have to we have now the option to create MO1, 01, MO1, 02, MO1, 03. And that can be used to denote relationships across the MOs. So maybe the top item is the finished good, MO102 is subassembly, F103 is another subassembly. So just to save on time, I will not do that anymore on the sample database that we have just created. I'll switch back to our original SAM-LTD so that we can play around with the next topic that makes use of MO series. So let's use the, okay, my mouse, where is my mouse? Oh, sorry, let me just refresh that. So Sage did not like that. Run as administrator. Okay, let me log in again. All right, so now we are using SAM-LTD again, and then I have activated the MO series here as well. So let's now simulate a second way of generating MOs, which is through a sales order. So this could be, let's say, make to order client, wherein each SO can be mapped to an MO. So let's start off with an SO first. So this is customer 1400 FG 003 for our 3-level bomb item. And then let's say we ordered 20 pieces and post. So it doesn't matter for the price at this point. So this is order 132. A while ago, we were always creating MOs manually, but as I said, we have several ways of creating MOs. Another common way of doing it is to create MO from OE. So this is opening sales orders. Notice I have here an option. I can do it by item range, or I can do it by sales order. So whatever makes sense for the client. So for today, I'll just use sales order, and then I'll just call out the order we created a while ago. Notice we have an option here to combine. So if you have several sales orders for the same product, you can actually combine it into one MO. Another thing to highlight here is notice that we can set up to generate not only the MO of the finished good product. If it's really make to order, then I can actually select all levels. So now I can create an MO across each semi-finished good as well. And then this is just to set up the default. I'll just release it to make it fast. So this is FG003. I can select this particular line. Of the 20 ordered, maybe I just want to do a partial run, 10 pieces, create MO. So this is now generating MO against this sales order. And note that it did not only generate one order, it actually generated, in this case, 3. So if we go to MO entry, you would see here that, just scrolling down, I am actually using MO33 -1 for the finished good item, -2 for the semi-finish 4, -3 for semi-finish 5. So that is the MO series at work. It allows us to visually combine 3 MOs. The system knows MO33 and -1 is related to -2 from a purely logical perspective. And if we look at -1, this is for the finished good item, it would be able to detect that it is linked to this sales order. So from a reporting perspective, you know that it is linked together. From a child point of view, it knows that it has a child MO-02 for the subassembly 4. And of course, if we go to the next MO-2, it can detect that there's a child -3 underneath. So everything we talked about in terms of MO functionality stays the same, but this is just a way to do the MO numbering and a way to generate MOs very quickly. All right. So that's create MO from OE. The other things that we just need to quickly highlight here is other ways of creating MO includes MO import as well as quick MO entry. So if you want a fast way to input MOs, you can use the quick MO entry screen, set up the status, let's say to be released, and then indicate here which products you want, quantity, and then another product, quantity, and then just post. So that's one way of doing it. The fastest way, of course, is by import. So this is now using an Excel template. So the template here just allows you to list down any number of rows of finished good products with a quantity and then import it back into Sage and then have those MOs generated. So this is particularly useful when you are setting up your beginning balances for MF. So the template is this, and notice we have some comments here to indicate what happens if you leave certain columns blank. Only the item number, production area, and the order quantity columns are really mandatory. The rest can be imported. While we are talking about importing, just note I forgot to highlight a while ago that when we were defining the BOMs, we do have the import utility as well. So you can go to BOM import utility. We would have provided you with all of the templates, and this is how you migrate BOMs from maybe the client's legacy system into Sage manufacturing BOM. So I won't show this anymore in the interest of time, but you can do that for the BOM maintenance and the MO import. All right. So what I would do next is start talking about specific functionality and MF options that might be useful to the clients. But let's see how much time we have and how much we can squeeze into it. But one critical function that we need to cover is the BOM type in bill of material. So this is using FG003 here. Notice that when we were setting up the BOM a while ago, I skipped through a field called BOM type. By default, we use assembled BOMs. An assembled BOM, by definition, requires an MO to produce. So if you have a 3-level BOM, each level set up to be assembled, then the system would create an MO or expect an MO to be created for each BOM. Very similar to what we did a while ago in the MO entry screen, where we have MO-1 for the finished good, -2 for semi-finished good, -3 for the semi-finished good number 5, right? If I wanted to produce the same product, but don't want to create MOs for the sub-assemblies, uh, one way of doing that is to use phantom BOMs. So this time around, just to show you, let's change the setting for SF004. So SF004 is the semi-finished good item. From assembled, I can switch it to phantom. And then for components, I can see there's a subassembly 5. So I can go there to subassembly 5 as well. And also change this to phantom. So we have the same, essentially the same BOMs, 3-level BOM. The only thing we change is the BOM type to phantom. And when we now go back to the MO entry screen, so regardless of how you generate your MO, the effect would still be the same here. So if we put FG003 for 10 pieces, notice now that the material requirement has changed. It is actually collapsing the BOM of subassembly 4 and subassembly 5. to combine all of the 3 levels of BOM into one MO for the top item. So this is the effect of a phantom BOM. The main objective normally for clients is to simplify the order processing. So technically, from an R&D point of view, anything that can be combined is a BOM. But maybe from production management point of view, they don't need to track every one of them. So only those that they want to track would be assembled BOMs. Anything else will become phantom. And when they generate the MO, automatically the system just explodes the BOM as needed. All right. So that's the usage of phantom BOMs. And it just makes things faster. So let me go back to the bill of material setting here and switch back our phantom BOM setting. For SF004, this is phantom. Let's just say, just to maybe do one more demonstration. If I set this to assembled now, SF005, and try to create another MO, this is just to reinforce, just in case some of you are still a bit confused by the phantom BOM. FG003, 10. Notice now that material-wise, it exploded SF004, which is still a phantom, but SF5, the semi-finished good number 5, is not a phantom anymore, and it's now requiring the system to create an MO to process it. And just to further drill it into you, so SF4, if I change it back to assembled, save, go back to the MO entry, refresh, FG003, for 10, the effect is now SF004 requires an MO, and you're back to a 3 BOM 3 MO setup. So another common usage of phantom is spare parts. So maybe the client do not intend to assemble semi-finished 4 at any time. But then if, let's say, a client needs a replacement part, they want the system to know what is inside SF004. And even though it's a phantom, I can create an MO to produce that semi-finished item and then sell it, receive it to stock, sell it in OE as a spare part. So that's just to explain what we need the phantom for. Okay, so I hope that was clear. Now, just to make sure that we don't run out of time, let me jump to the next topic here. Going back to our visual process flowchart for manufacturing. So we have already shown you the first 3 options there. So you have create MO, issuance, return receipt. I showed you the backlash. I showed you the Kanban. I want to make sure that we cover the batch MO. So you can see underneath, we actually have an option here to process batch MOs. And for batch MO, this is actually the same concept, but now we are processing multiple products in one production run. So you can see when we open the batch MO screen, the major difference that would pop up is you can see that I can indicate here how much, let's say, of FG4 do I want to produce at the same time with FG5. So this is now 2 products being produced at the same time. You can have as many items as you want in the batch MO, but the basic logic behind this is you can have certain items which are produced at the same time in the same production run. So the best example that we always use for our training is, imagine if your client has raw materials in the form of steel rolls or paper rolls, anything like a roll or a rod that they have to cut or slit to different sizes before they can do anything else with it. So what typically happens is the client will buy maybe a standard sized steel roll. Maybe the length of that roll would be 100 centimeters. And then they need to cut it to, let's say, 20-centimeter roll and the 60-centimeter roll. So in the physical world, they will load that roll into a machine. The operation is slitting or cutting. And at the end of the run, they get the same amount, rough equivalent weight. One is 20-centimeter roll, the other is a 60-centimeter roll. From a Sage inventory control point of view, that would be 2 inventory items. So this scenario here exactly mimics that scenario wherein I load a roll, I expect to get 2 different products, different properties, and then now I am creating child MOs. You can see the MO series also being used here for this batch. So if we go now to the MO entry, the child MO entry, just to show you what it did in the back end. We actually created MO34-1. This is the first roll product, for example. And you can see that the BOM requirement is this, let's say, steel roll at this quantity. So maybe it's a smaller piece. The other MO34-2 also uses the same raw material, but notice the difference in quantity proportion. So this is now 2 versus 5 proportionally. So this is a difference in dimension or size only. But they're using the same raw material. So now if we go to batch issuance, I would be doing it by batch. Notice now that the system knows to combine the raw material being consumed. I know that the required quantity is 60 kilos, but let's just say I issued a little bit more. Let's say 65. So notice there's a warning, but I can ignore that post. So this is now a batch issuance. For raw material 12, if we go now into the issuance screen, so any of this issuance screen is fine. Notice that there's a batch issuance number 2. And this is with respect to MO34-1, 34-2, the same raw material, but the system knows to split it proportionally based on the BOM requirement. So total of 65 was issued. It was divided proportionally. And of course, if that means if we go to our MO and refresh, you can see that 43.33 was assigned here. This is 21.667. So the same for return. So let's use this chance to quickly show you how a return would look like. So this is now just in case I realize I made a mistake. It wasn't 65 kilo. Actually, it was just 63. So I want to return 2 kilos in post. So again, the system needs to divide it proportionally across those 2 MOs. And if we just refresh the MO here, you would see now that it was revised to 21 kilo for dash 1. Dash 2 is now 42 kilo for a total of 63. All right. And eventually we would be receiving, again, this is receipt is at the same time. So now we are doing a batch receipt. How much of this was produced? So whether it's 9 or 8, I can have differences here as well. Post. Eventually, the MO can be closed. But notice now that this is batch MO closeout, and we are now closing the batch instead of the child MO separately. So just let me emphasize that. So if you go in here and refresh, notice that the MO status flag cannot be manually closed if the MO is a batch MO. So the only way to close it would be using the batch MO entry screen. Let me go there, this one, and then close it and save. So now the system is closing each child order as needed, and whatever was allocated to that MO would then trigger the adjustment based on what we discussed already early on in terms of input and output. So that is in essence what batch MO processing is all about. And the main key point here that I need to highlight is for batch MO to work, we need to know the expected output of each product at the beginning. So when we were creating that batch MO, it cannot be that I ordered just one and then at the end of production run just receive according to what happened. That would cause the proportion to be incorrect and would greatly uh, affect how costing would be done by the system. So the main limitation here that I'm trying to highlight is for batch MO to work, the planner needs to know what products are expected to be produced at the correct proportional relationship. So how many of this versus how many of this? And that is to be expected. There could be variance at the end, but the expectation must be known beforehand, before the batch MO is released, so that we know how to distribute the cost. It's because the cost distribution is based on the BOM requirement of each component with respect to the ordered quantity. So if they don't know the ordered quantity at the beginning, then we don't know how to distribute the cost properly. So just be aware of that. So batch MO is very useful. A lot of our clients are doing it to simplify their processing, but they need to know at the beginning how much of which items is expected to be produced. All right, that's batch MO. And just to make sure that I am covering it properly, let me also show you what happens if we activate manufacturing lot. So I won't do it in the sample database anymore because it takes time to set up. But for manufacturing lot, it is a add-on module that, as I said earlier, was installed together with MF, but requires activation if the client needs it. So for the client to activate manufacturing lot, it assumes they are using the serialized inventory module of Sage. So for those who might not be familiar with that, let me just quickly show you how lot serial looks like in Sage. So this is now, for example, a raw material, which is lot track. So you can see that we have activated lot tracking here. And now you need to define a lot mask and determine if this particular item has expiry date or not. So this is Sage serialized inventory. This is an example of an item which is lot track. This is now an example of an item which is serial track. So in Sage, you can have either or both. So now you have serial tracked items. And if the client needs lot tracking, they need serialized inventory in Sage and manufacturing lot in manufacturing. So this way, when they receive their raw materials, let's say during PO receipt, there's a lot. when they do the MO issuance to the production floor, there will be a lot allocation. When they receive their finished good products back from production floor, there will be lot. And then eventually, when they sell it to their customer via OE shipment, there will be a lot as well. So when there is if let's say there is a need to do a product recall, the system can now provide a start to finish checking of which lot went to which lot, sold to who, and do a recall. All right. So just note that is the situation. Uh, this is manufacturing lot. Once you activate manufacturing lot, there is actually zero setup involved. And you can see that there is zero transaction in manufacturing lot. That is because all of the transactions are in manufacturing order. This is just to enable lot tracking. And just to quickly demonstrate, let's do a quick MO with a lot tracked item. So let's say this is FG101 for 10 pieces. I want to release the order to make it fast, save. So this is FG101, MO35. Everything else remains the same except when I do a issuance, let's say issuance by product, for MO35, let's say quantity of, let's say half of what we ordered, so partial issuance. Now you can see these three raw materials are or can be lot tracked. So some are lot, some are serial, and the quantity that we have issued is auto-allocating the lots based on your policy in IC options. So of course you can manually change this, you can manually allocate, but if the materials is lot tracked, then there must be a lot allocation. If the component is serial tracked, then there must be a allocation for you to be able to post. So this is issuance with lots. And then of course, if you want to do a receipt with lot, I can then go in here for MO34, I'm sorry, for MO35. Maybe I'm doing a partial receipt as well. This is now the user generating or typing a lot. So this is one lot or to generate. So this is now lot number 3 for FG101, quantity of 5. This is the expiry date we want to use. And of course, if possible to change and then post. So this is a MO receipt with lot serial. So if you notice, the transaction is the same. The only addition that we have done is require lot allocation and serial allocation. So that's manufacturing lot option. So at this point, we've actually already talked about two manufacturing modules, manufacturing order and the manufacturing lot. Okay. Now, while I'm on this screen, I would also like to take the chance to segue a bit to show you how the version 7.3 2026 of manufacturing can work with our chat module. So notice, I'm sure you have noticed since way earlier today, whenever we were doing a transaction, there's actually an icon here for chat. So this is actually in relation to our chat module. This is now a way for the user, as they post a transaction in uh, manufacturing, be able to trigger a communication through our chat module. So this chat module was covered in yesterday's training. With version 7.3 of manufacturing, you can see that we can trigger a chat link to an MO, or in this case, a receipt automatically, and have chat auto-populate who would be included in that chat based on the template setup. And maybe people would use this to communicate with the downstream personnel. So maybe if I was the operator who did the MO receipt, I want the next person to please follow up on this receipt. So this is purely for chat purposes, and in some situations, allow them to update optional fields as well. So just know, I won't go into too much detail for the chat, but note that when we are doing a transaction in manufacturing, there is now an option to trigger a chat to uh, communicate with downstream people. So just to show you, I can do the same for the BOM. So the bill of material will have a chat icon as well. And we were able to do it for the MO as well. So I wasn't just doing it, but let's say for MO, let's just open MO33, I can trigger a chat around that. So now this is a chat around MO33. Maybe I want the next person in line, please check if stock is available. Or maybe I want to tell them to start picking, start moving something, or let somebody get an approval, and then have them update optional fields, maybe color green, change status to open, priority high, and then share this information across the whole team on the shop floor. So this is now to limit the paper going back and forth. Notice as well in the chat function, we have inquiry, which is the custom inquiries. So this is a way to disseminate or share information to the production operators on the floor just using the chat module. So maybe they need to see the MO components. Maybe they need to see MO operations, what is involved. All of this are data that resides within the Sage 300 database. And as long as we know how to create the SQL statements to query, we can then put it as part of the templates used for manufacturing. So maybe uh, to wrap up the chat part of this, I just need to go into the chat setup and show you a quick template to explain how we did it. So here you can see we have created a MO entry template where we are linking it to the MO number. And these are the optional fields that we want to expose to the user. These are the people that will be automatically included in this chat. And these are the custom inquiries that can be triggered or used during the chatting around the MO. So all of this were covered in yesterday's training. I just wanted to highlight today that we can trigger it in the MO entry screens. All right. So that would be essentially about chatting with manufacturing. And then let me just close this. So for the next topic, I just want to also cover features that we have added into MF over time. And then one of them would be if you look at the MO entry screen, people who have been looking at it since way before probably would notice that there are extra buttons at the bottom. There's a adjust PM button uh, underneath. So what does it mean? So this is a feature that we added in 7.1, and it is meant for use by clients who might think of packaging materials as negligible. They don't want to bother issuing returning packaging materials. They just want to focus on the direct raw materials when they are running a production run. So to do that, we have added a adjust PM function that can automatically adjust packaging materials as needed. So let me quickly demonstrate. So for FG003 again, let's say I want to produce pen. Let's release this order. Note that this this adjust PM function is dependent on the type of the component. So in this example, we have raw materials marked as direct, and then two materials marked as packaging. So to process MO36, let's just quickly do an issuance here. Let's say while I'm running MO36, I would only focus on raw materials I need during assembly. So notice this is a way to do that as well. I can filter by operation code. I can just issue all. This is all that I need for raw material post. And then maybe at a certain time, I can now do receipts, transaction receipts. So they don't care about packaging material in this scenario. They just want to say, okay, at this point in time, maybe I did a partial receipt of the 10. Maybe I've already produced 5. So this is now receiving 5. And if we go back to the MO and refresh, we would see here that we have issued quantity for the direct raw materials, no issuance yet for the packaging materials. History-wise, I only have these 4 lines. So 3 issuances, 1 receipt. At this point, if I want to reflect adjusted packaging material entries, I can just click on that new button down there, and it's actually automatically issuing packaging materials based on my quantity receipt. The effect is now there is a second issuance just for packaging materials. It just so happens that it's 1:1, so it's 5 each, and it's now issued. What happens if I make a correction? So let's say I realize I made a mistake. It wasn't 5 that was produced. It was actually just 4. So I received 5 earlier. To reverse a receipt, it's actually just a negative receipt. So now I'm posting a adjustment of -1, and that MO will now refresh and see quantity of 4. And I can trigger again another adjust PM. So the system is smart enough to check what was previously released, react to what is the current quantity totally received, and then under history, and here you can actually see it. There is now a change. We actually returned 1 each as well. So the history now posted a return of 1 each. So this is just a feature added just in case your client doesn't want to bother to track the issuance of packaging materials. But since it's a stock item and it has cost, maybe negligible, but still has cost, they still need to issue that item. And the adjust PM is an easy way of doing it. All right, so just be aware of that. Another small change that we have done in version 7.1 is actually enhancing the scrap transaction. So let me just explain first what the scrap is all about. So in this, using this MO36 as an example, we can see how much was issued per component. They are now part of WIP, and it could be at a certain point of the production run, I lost some of those WIP items. So I can go into scrap, tell the system how much was scrapped. So I can extract all of the components issued against this MO, and I am now able to input, let's say, a scrap quantity. So let's say if I lost 2 here and maybe 1 here. So this is the scrap transaction. So when you do a scrap, you're just telling the system that something went wrong. We lost these items. In version 7.1, that would also trigger an adjustment in the MO material tab, wherein you can see that we now have a scrap of 1 and 2, but the system also automatically increase the quantity per proportional requirement so that you can issue out a replacement for those scrap items. So originally there was no balance left on these 2 items, but because of the scrap, now there is a balance of 1 and 2, and I am now able to issue those raw materials to the production floor. All right. So if we want to show you that, I can go into the issuance screen using MO36 still for operation 100 only. And you can see that the quantity balance is 1 and 2, which is equivalent to our scrap. So just note, when we did the scrap, it did not trigger any effect on inventory control. There is no general ledger entry until you, of course, make this issuance. But the scrapping itself does not uh, trigger a ledger entry in Sage. If the client wants scrap to have a separate ledger entry, have a separate uh, cost and ledger effect from manufacturing, then what they can do instead of scrapping is to return it. So some clients, they don't want to scrap. Rather, whenever there's something that gets damaged or not good on the production floor, they will post a return. And when they return, so I can just do a quick example here. So I can do a return, just even using the same MO, doesn't matter. So instead of scrap, maybe I could have posted a return here, wherein I would say 1 of this and 2 of that would be returned where. So there is a return location here, location code, that one. So I can change this from 1 to maybe 2. So this is returning the item to a separate location and then posting. So this is now posted as a return, and it would be in a different location, maybe a reject or quality location. Somebody will then have to check on it, and somebody will have to eventually scrap it, maybe using internal usage. So that's a valid way of processing returns as well. And typically, it is done a lot in Asia, mainly because people don't trust the production floor that much. So they are worried that operators on the floor could be stealing the raw materials. So they require any scrap to be returned to a reject location, have a cost accountant check it, and scrap it separately. The only downside to doing that would be that you were not able to see the losses linked to a specific MO anymore. Everything gets processed separately. So you might have to change your reporting that a return to a specific location is then the basis for scrap reporting rather than the scrap quantity linked to an MO in the manufacturing module. All right. So nothing wrong with doing that. It's just a different way of recording it in Sage. So we've already covered MO, issuance, return receipts, transfers. We have talked about backflush. We've talked about uh, Kanbans as well. The next topic is another optional transaction called transfer. So MO transfer is not a required step in our processing. That's why it's not in the process flow chart that we were using earlier. But it can be quite useful for clients who wants to uh, create a WIP location. So remember that when we were creating the production area, we were saying that the location there points to the destination location. The raw materials in the BOM, you already assigned a source location. So the system actually knows from where to get raw materials. But for some clients, they want to have a WIP location wherein they want to transfer raw materials from the warehouse to that WIP location first, and then use maybe backflush or MO issuance to deduct against that WIP location. So if that is the situation, then the MO transfer can be useful to move the material needed in in one MO to a different location. So again, I'll just use MO36 as basis for this across all locations. I can then extract what components have outstanding balances. I can then just transfer all if I want to and post. So in the back end, this is just a IC transfer number TF01. If we do it in MO, it just simplifies the data input based on items in the balance. And another benefit of doing it here is in the MO for MO36. It's also part of our history. So if you want to report against it, you can. But the benefit of using a WIP location is that maybe if the production runs are relatively slow, you can then trigger a stock count against that WIP location. So this client, if by using the WIP location, can actually report on what is still on hand on WIP location over time. Another useful usage of this is for bulk issuance. So for some industries, some of their components are too small or too hard to count. And even though maybe you just need 8 pieces of that, let's say, bolt or screw, the warehouse man will not count 8 pieces and give it to you. They'll give you a whole box of maybe 100 pieces. Just get it yourself. They will leave it in a shared location. Maybe it's the WIP location or the bulk location. And production people only get it from that location as they need it. The client would just rely on periodic stock count to check for the accuracy of the quantity on hand against that bulk WIP location. And what happens for that kind of scenario is they will just backflush those components against WIP or bulk location as needed. So nobody is really issuing counting against it anymore. It's just automatically based off the BOM requirement. So that's very easy to do in MF because our transfer can be based on operation. So what happens is they can create an operation code called bulk issuance or bulk material issuance, put all of those bulk items inside that operation, And then when they are doing transfers, they can just call it out and move it accordingly. The same can be done for the issuance side of it. I can always issue or backdash against bulk operations. So that's with respect to MO transfer, which is one of the transactions that is optional. There are two more optional transactions here. So WIP consumption and operation status entries. For scrap, we have already talked about it, so that's done. For WIP consumption, uh, it is not normally used by a lot of clients. It's only useful if the production runs of the client is very, very slow and the output is very small. So what do we mean by that? So imagine if you are a manufacturer that produces ship propellers. So maybe by ship, I'm referring to the very big ship, like the cruise liners. If you produce, if your production MO run is one giant propeller, and you have 1,000 components you are issuing against that propeller, and your production run maybe is 1 month. So what happens in MF is we have an MO for one propeller. Every day of the month, there is a material issuance happening on the floor, but then the propeller does not come in maybe until the end of the month because the quantity is just one. It's not yet complete. I cannot receive it. I cannot ship it yet. But from a WIP report perspective, I want to know how many of those components I issued to produce that propeller has already been consumed off the production floor. So the way to do that would be through the WIP consumption. So after I issue the raw material, there is a optional step here. I can go into the MO36 example that we were playing with. I can, oops, I can see in this screen, I'll just make it a bit bigger, how many of those components were issued out already. So I can see it under the unallocated quantity. And maybe somebody is in charge of recording how much of these items were actually already consumed. I can post that. This is now a WIP allocation number 3. And if we go back to the MO and refresh, you can see that the WIP quantities have changed. We now have a column here called consume. And in the history, I can also see allocation transactions on a per raw material basis. So it's a workaround to record the usage of WIP, not affecting inventory control in any way. So there is no general ledger entries. There is no stock increase or decrease. This is just the production personnel recording how much of this WIP quantities have already been consumed. So it's not required step, but can be very useful when it comes to generating the price. The last transaction there, operation status entry, is another optional step that we can do to track the status of operation. We sometimes call this the poor man's shop floor. So the best way to see or track the status of production is through shop floor control, because that's where we are generating time entries and then tracking them against the MO operations. But if the client doesn't need full shop floor, they only want to have a way to input into the system what is already happening to select MOs. They can do that using the MO operation entry. So this is just the filter. So maybe I'm only updating the status for assembly operations. So now I can filter according to this. And maybe the production secretary is basically saying that this one has started today. We expect it to be completed by Monday. And then of the quantity order of 10, maybe we have already produced 2 as of this moment. And then my comment here is started production at, let's say, 2 p.m. So I can save this kinds of input. All of it, however, is just for reference only. So we are not, again, generating any changes to the inventory control. There is no accounting entries being created at this point. It does not affect the MO in any way. It doesn't affect issuance, return receipt. It's purely a way to update the status of the MO. And we have provided a inquiry called operation status inquiry to call out data that was entered through this screen. So this is just a way to provide users or management with the status update of what's happening against the MO without really doing anything that affects Sage. All right. So those are the transactions that we do in MF manufacturing, and the rest is just additional options that we just need to cater to. So before we do that, let me also go back to setup and then briefly touch upon scheduler. So this is a feature that we have that I want to highlight today, wherein we can actually schedule these 4 transactions to run automatically on a predetermined basis. So what we are doing here is making use of Windows task schedulers to trigger maybe the cost rollup, standard cost to IC, copy item cost from IC, and maybe even copy BOM to IC if we want to. So these are just what we have already discussed earlier. I can do this manually, but as you can see, most of it is related to cost. If the clients, for example, want to refresh their standard costs every week, then they can define here that they want to do a copy cost from IC at, let's say, midnight Saturday, and then do a BOM cost rollup at Sunday morning 10 a.m. And then maybe if they are using standard cost in Sage, after the BOM cost rollup, roughly around Sunday noon, trigger a copy standard cost to IC. So that can be scheduled in that fashion. And the way to do it would be to set up a scheduler in MF setup. Note that the number, the run number here needs to be numeric. So it cannot be 0, 1. It has to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is which company we are logging into, SAM Ltd in this case. And then this is the Sage user ID that we want to use to log in and trigger this automated scheduled task. So I'm just using admin, but again, in the real world, we don't want to use admin for this purpose. It has to be a specially designated account. And then when we save this, notice that once we have the login credentials, I can set up parameters. So which product do I want to do BOM cost rollups? Which standard cost range do we want to do? So in my example here, it's just location 1. For copy item cost, maybe I just want to limit it to RM1 to RM12. Use most recent cost, get it from location 1. Do I want, let's say, add 10% and save? So all of this are just parameters that gets to be stored under the Sage shared data. So maybe for the clients on the room, in Sage, if you are not aware, we have two folders, the program directory and the shared data directory. So for the schedule INI or config file, we actually store it in the shared data, and you can see it here. So there's an MF scheduler setting. This is actually what we just created. This is how to connect. What are the parameters that we define? So you can see it's raw material 1 to 12 for copying of costs from IC. And then actually I changed it a while ago to add 10%. So this is where it is defined. And then under the Sage program path, MF73, this is where we define the scheduler exe files. So it's an application file that you link to a task scheduler based on the preferred timing. And the effect of that is, let's say if I trigger a copy cost schedule, it will just run in the background. So you can see it run and it would close. And then maybe after X amount of time, I will trigger the BOM cost rollup. And this is now triggering a cost rollup for the items in that range. Afterwards, it can then close again automatically. So bottom line, we can schedule transactions. We are using Windows Task Scheduler to do that. You can use the argument in the task scheduler to point to the INI file that you want to use in that particular task, and then have all of this setup task done when people are not using the system. So just know we have a scheduler function there. Another small thing related to setup here is the registry refresh. So in some cases, the registries of Sage and manufacturing maybe is not defined for new users in a remote desktop environment. So what we have done is to minimize the need for IT to always do it physically. We actually have added a registry refresh button here, and it just requires them to run it as a administrator and then refresh. So this is actually doing something like the regedit or regACC in Sage, wherein it's registering all of the OCX files used by AutoSimply to have it be available to this user on that client machine or device. So just know we are able to do that using the setup registry refresh. Okay, so it just takes a few minutes. No need to wait for it to complete. Let's just leave it running in the background. And then, okay, it's still doing it. What I want to do next is just quickly highlight, segue a little bit again from manufacturing to barcode. So everything that we have done, the issuance, the receipt, the backflush, all of those I can also do on a barcode device. So that is actually part of the inventory barcode module. And for us to be able to do it, of course, the client just needs to buy barcode MF, and they need to have the barcode user licenses to do it. But instead of the MO issuance return receipts that I've shown you already today, we can go into barcode. Okay. And then this, I just need to refresh this, who is logged into this. So I'll just log out here. So let's say this is user one for SAM Ltd. Log in. So this is now, for those who did not attend yesterday's training, this is now the inventory barcode module. And the goal here is to essentially extend Sage 300 to the frontline users. So instead of using a desktop laptop to encode the MO issuance, MO return, MO receipts. We can make use of inventory barcode, use the barcode MF screen to do issuances, receipts, backflush, Kanban. So it's a mobile platform, so that means people can walk around the warehouse floor, scan items as needed. It is primarily designed for scanning, so if we can use labels, barcode labels on the raw material components or the finished good item, we can scan the MO, scan the raw material being issued, input the quantity as it is happening on the floor. Because it is mobile, all of this posting is happening real time as well. So as somebody is doing a issuance, there is no time delay between the warehouse floor posting it with the management in Sage backend. So those are the key main benefits. The last benefit, of course, is in terms of ease of use. So it is much easier for a warehouseman to post receipts and issuances using barcode than the standard screens in Sage. So just to quickly give you a feel of it, this is now the MO issuance screen on the handheld. I just need to select which MO am I processing. So let's just say it's MO36 again. This would extract, show me the items that needs to be issued. So these are the open quantities. Ideally, I am scanning. So if I'm the warehouseman, I am scanning the barcode label of the box, maybe of the 6 that I need. I pick 2. You can see here that barcode would be able to show the partial picking, denoted as a yellow color. If I'm scanning or selecting PM002 for a total quantity of 6, you can see now that the green color indicates that we have already fully picked that line. I can review, this is what has been done, and I can then post, and this is now an MO issuance posted against the MO from barcode module. So that's how easy it is if we are using a handheld. So now let me also show it to you if we were processing a MO with lots. So this is even more critical the moment the client is using lot tracking or serial tracking, because this alleviates the pain of recording transactions with lot serial. So now I'm doing the same raw material issuance. I know that this is for MO37, so I can just type 37. The system can drill down directly to that. I can also scan. So if the MO number is expressed as a barcode, we can just scan it off the piece of paper and post directly. Now, this is an example of an MO where the raw materials are locked and serial tracked. So ideally, I am scanning RM101. I'm now having to select or scan which specific lot of RM101 was used for this MO. So ideally, I'm scanning that, but even without a scanner, I can search which lots are available. So maybe for whatever reason, I got it from 5 here, 5 there. So this is now the lot being picked for that MO. And then let's say for an item here, I can just allocate 10. So this is like if you want to rely on the auto allocate function in Sage. And then for the serial numbers, again, I can auto allocate, but ideally, I am scanning off the box of each piece, which serial numbers were being issued. At this time, I can post. That would be a MO issuance with lot serial details using barcode module. And this is now issuance 26. If we go back to the Sage MO entry screen, refresh, I can see there's no output just yet. But if I look at the material tab, we have fully issued. History shows us that the quantities already issued. with the proper lot serial tracking underneath. And then just to complete that example, eventually I would receive. I can then say again, this is MO37. And now we are receiving the finished good quantity for this item FG101. So I can just auto-generate maybe for a total of 10, 2 lots. So it can be something like this. Notice that expiry date, we can still change if we want to. And then eventually, so this is now fully receiving 10 pieces across two lots, post. And then this is now posted. So this is just to emphasize that the barcode module can greatly simplify the MO transactions and make it real time with the use of mobile devices. I won't show it anymore today, but just note that manufacturing also supports bin tracking by ORCID. So for those who are not familiar with it, ORCID, another developer for Sage 300, has a bin tracking module which allows you to split locations in Sage into smaller bins. Once you activate that, then that means when we do any transaction involving stock, it has to also record the bin details with it. So when I receive to location 1, I need to say this item was put into bin 1A versus bin 1B. When we issue to the MO, the raw material, I need to tell the system from which bin did I get it from. Is it lot tracked or serial tracked? Then I also need to provide that information. And then eventually the product comes in. Again, I have to say which bin does it go into. And when we sell the product to the customer, then in barcode, I can also select which location bin did I get it from. So it's another layer of information on top of the location control of Sage 300. So bin tracking is supported by both the manufacturing module, if you're just using the desktop screens in Sage, also by the barcode module for both warehouse operations, so POOE, stock transfer, stock count, as well as manufacturing transactions, material issuance, receipts, backflush, and then. All right. So that is with respect to barcode. Now, another quick thing to quickly demonstrate today is the manufacturing app. So let me just go there. So a while ago, we were showing you the barcode for manufacturing. Just know that we have another app which we call manufacturing app that can be used with manufacturing. So this is actually meant to be our web screen. So manufacturing has a limited web screen for Sage 300 that you can use, but actually we would prefer if you use the manufacturing app instead. Why? It's mainly because the web screens of Sage still does not support lot serial and bin tracking. So the moment the client needs lot serial, then they cannot use the web screen. If the client needs bins, even more, they cannot use the web screen. So instead of web screen, just know that you have an option to use the manufacturing app. This is, of course, built on top of our barcode module. So if the client wants to use it, they need to get barcode users. Uh, some people might suddenly think, why do we need to have barcode to users instead of just using the web screen? But the quick answer to that is when you use the web screens of Sage, you actually are consuming LAN packs as well. So uh, the web screen is just another way of logging into Sage. And by using the manufacturing app, you now have a way to actually switch to barcode users, which are cheaper than LAN packs. So that's just an option for the client. So notice now that this is the main screen for the manufacturing app. I can just, let's say, filter to all MOs which are released. Notice that we have changed the workflow a bit. When the client is using manufacturing app, we made it a bit simpler. You start off with an inquiry. I can see which MOs are released. I can even filter to, let's say, anything with a 3 maybe. So this is on MO number, finished good item, or descriptions. So if you want to, you can play around with the MO number, item description filters here. If let's say I want to process MO number 3, this is now showing us what raw materials are needed to be issued against this MO. I can then click on issuance, return, receipt, or even backlash. So it's the same transaction as what we were doing before, but we have slightly changed the screen interface to make it work off an app. And then maybe now, let's say I want to issue one of this and let's say two of that. So notice that we have added a, what do we call that? Numpad on the screen. This is because the user might be making use of tablets. So we don't want to pop up the screen anymore. I can post. This is the same as an MO issuance. Posting against MO number 3, issuance 27. So just to show that, I can go to manufacturing, transaction, MO entry. Where's my MO? Just drill down here. Okay, I closed it. Anyway, I'll open MO number 3. And we will see here that we have actually issued 27. So doesn't matter if the client is using our desktop screen, the barcode screen, or the manufacturing app screen. The end result is the same in manufacturing. And just to give you a feel of it, so again, if we, let's say I want to deal with 101 only. So this is now filtering across open MOs for an item with lot. So let's say it's MO35. These are raw materials with lots. So when I make an issuance, I can then issue, let's say for the first item, I want to issue 3. And this is now drilling down to the lot screen. I can scan the lot or select maybe 1 here, 1 there, 1 there, for a total of 3. So this is now issuance of lot, and then I'll just post. So it's the same, roughly the same as the barcode issuance screen, but using the manufacturing app. All right, so I won't belabor it anymore, but just know that we do have manufacturing app, and we can actually create transactions here this way if we want, or do item inquiries this way, as well as create MOs. So it's essentially the same. It's not exactly like the barcode app. It doesn't cover all of the transactions still, but it gives you another way of using our barcode users to post manufacturing transactions. So at this point, we have 10 minutes left. I guess, Rob, can we check if there are any questions? We can open the floor to questions for now. Hello, Rob. Did I lose you? Hold on. Rob? Maybe Rob is not hearing us. Let me just see if there's any question. So I just have to start from the bottom, I guess. So somebody was asking, can you assign lots to a particular MO? Okay, so can we assign lots to a particular MO? Yes. So during the MO issuance step, I can choose any lot to be issued to any MO. So it can be two lots going to the same MO. It's more, I'm guessing the question is coming from a policy perspective. So if the client is very strict in terms of lot control, maybe they will say that one lot of material should only go to one lot of finished good item for purposes of tracking. So that's a very common process procedure, but that is not required in manufacturing processing. I can bypass that if I wanted to. All right. And then Stan was asking for batch MO, the components in the child MO need to be identical. Usually it is. So when we talk about the batch MO, the reason why you're putting the finished good products into one batch is because they are identical. So uh, most likely they are using the same components, but it is possible to have certain components only needed by certain products in that batch. If that happens, then 100% of that component consumption will be recorded only to the product that needs it. So that would be a different way of using the batch MO, but it would be allowed. All right. And depending on the time, I can talk about it a little bit more later. Mark was asking regarding batch MO processing, how does lot tracking assignment of lots come? Okay. So if the batch MO is dealing with lots, then the same. The system would just automatically split the lots according to the material requirement of each of the products. The only tricky thing here is if we're dealing with serial items. If we're dealing with serialized raw materials, uh, the splitting cannot allow half of a serial item going to only one MO. So the system will just arbitrarily assign it to one batch MO. All right. But it can be done, and it will be split according to the proportional requirement. So Doug is asking if you are giving a user rights to create transactions in MF, do they also need rights to IC transaction as well? Uh, yeah, okay. Technically, yes, but only in the sense that we need, okay, let me, for Doug's question, it's talking about the security group. So we don't need we don't need, okay. So Doug was asking if I'm doing MO issuance, and we talked about it using IC shipment. I don't need you to assign me shipment posting in IC anymore. I only need you to assign security to that user. Let's say, where's my manufacturing? I only need you to give, let's say, test user ISA access to MO issuance. Uh, this one, issuance posting. So I only need this. In IC, the only thing we need to have access to for the user is common inquiry. So this is just so that we have access to the data for item reading only. We don't need to get access to specific transactions here anymore. Okay, so that's just to address that question. Let me go back here. Okay, so I think that covered all of the questions there. All right. So since we have a little bit of time, let me go back to Stan's question a while ago. So Stan was asking for the batch MO. Does it need to have a common or shared uh, component across the different products? The quick answer there is no. And to illustrate what we mean there, from from an example that would make sense, would be to, let's say, use the batch MO processing for, let's say, Coke product. So imagine if I am Coca-Cola and I am producing 500 ml Coke bottle, 1 liter Coke bottle, and let's say 2 liter Coke bottle, right? So this is the product code. And then the components that I need would be, I need Coke formula. So this is the common raw material across the 3 products. So this is, let's say, 500 ml. And then this is 1000 ml. This is 2000 ml. I also need a 500 ml bottle. So I need one. I don't need it here. And in a similar fashion, 1 liter bottle and 2 liter bottle. And then maybe I need a cap. So in this case, I don't need that. I need this. I need this. And then for the cap, it would be the same. So in this scenario, this is answering Stan's question a while ago. The bottle is specific to the product. Cap and the Coke formula are the common raw materials needed by the products, and that would be the one that would be proportionally distributed. If I issue 10 500 ml bottles, the system knows that 100% of that goes to this product. If I issue 30 bottle caps, if I'm ordering, let's just say 100 bottles of each of this, and I issued 300 caps, the system knows 100 of that would go to each bottle. That's just proportionality, right? And then for the Coke formula, it would know that I need how many ml for each product. And if I issue, let's say, 400,000 ml, it would just distribute it proportionally. So the batch MO can work this way. The only thing that I'm highlighting here is how the system is allocating each component proportionally across the BOM based on the order quantity of each product. And that's what I was trying to highlight earlier. When we use batch MO, I need to know which products will be produced together and how many each do I expect to produce. That way I know the proportion that we can be using. So it would be this. Just to complete the screen here, it would be like this, right? Okay, so I hope that answered Stan's question. Is Robert back?
I am.
Yep, go ahead. I think it's
So we're good then for this session,
correct.
and we take the half hour till 3, and we're back for session 3 of the manufacturing training.